Hey everybody, welcome to another Thursday night get together. Today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite bands, AC/DC. And of course, there were two different eras of AC/DC. You have the Bon Scott era. Bon Scott tragically passed away in 1980, and then Brian Johnson was hired. And so you got the Brian Johnson era, starting with Back in Black. So what we're going to do tonight is we are going to list our top five Bon Scott songs and put them up against our top five Brian Johnson songs. See which one we like better. Kind of like we did last week with our Van Hagar, David Lee Roth solo episode that we did. I have, of course, Tim Derling, who joined us last week from Tim's Vinyl Confessions. And Gary from Physical Format Rock and Roll joins us tonight. So it's just going to be the three of us. So we should have this episode wrapped up in about 2 hours, I think, right? So that's always our goal is to try and get it in under an hour, and it always ends up going like twice that long. But anyway, welcome, gentlemen.
Nice to be here.
All right, so Gary, you want to start us off with your number five Bon Scott and Brian Johnson picks?
Sure. For number five, okay, for Bon Scott, I went off of the Highway to Hell album with If You Want Blood, You've Got It. I like that. Of course, this was the first album that Mutt Lange produced, so it's kind of got that little more tight sound that AC/DC didn't quite have before he joined up. I always kind of like that whole, it reminds me of, the sentiment like in the Stones, It's Only Rock and Roll, where he says, if I could take a knife to my heart and spill it all over the stage, and all that, that if you want blood, you've got it. We're going to give
Mm-hmm.
you what we got. And it's a pretty frantic song. And I just think it's a good vocal, good rocking song. Uh, for number five on Brian Johnson, I went with the title track from Ball Breaker. I love that song, and it's just got this really, you know, and I don't know. When I hear Brian Johnson singing that, I can just picture him strutting around, kind of while he's singing it, and that vocals, the chorus just gets stuck in your head, you bright balls, ball breaker. It's just, I love it. I love the sound of that song. It's so simple and just smacks you right in the face every time you hear it. And so that's that's my two number five picks. Now you said you want us to pick which one we like best out of those two, which I didn't know until like 5 minutes ago. But I would say probably Ball Breaker out of those two would be my pick. So, but I love both of them. So, I mean, I love every song I'm going to mention tonight. So
Mm-hmm.
that's tough.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Good picks.
Thank you.
All right, Tim.
So I'm going to go for my number five Bon Scott song. I tried to go off the beaten path here, but like pick songs that I really did like. So I'm going to go off of High Voltage and go with Rock and Roll Singer.
Hmm.
And this is the one. This is the one that the Cult pretty much ripped off for Wildflower. Da 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 da.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I this is one of my favorite early AC/DC albums. I know this is a compilation. I realize that, but okay, so TNT. Let's call the Australian album TNT. 7 of the 9 songs made it onto here, but Rock and Roll Singer. And for my Brian Johnson era, I'm gonna go to an album I don't particularly care for, but a song that I do. I'm gonna go on the first track on Blow Up Your Video with Heat Seeker.
Oh,
Always liked this song, and gun to my head to make a choice. I think I'd pick Heat Seeker as my favorite of those two.
wow. Nice deep cuts.
Yeah.
Try it.
Well, and I, I'm not going with any of the deep cuts. I'm just like, I don't care if people think they're overplayed or they're cliche, whatever. They're just my go-to AC/DC songs. And my number five for the Brian Johnson era is going to be probably the first song I remember hearing by AC/DC on the radio. And that's going to be Highway to Hell. I mean, like you say, I love the Mutt Lange production on it. There's just something about it that it's just classic AC/DC. It's just perfect for the radio. It's a great anthem. Kind of ironic, just with the fact that that would be his last album with AC/DC. But I love the song nonetheless. I never get tired of hearing it. Unlike songs like "You Shook Me All Night Long" or even "Back in Black," it's not one of those where it's like, oh God, I never need to hear this song again. Something about "Highway to Hell" I've just always really loved. And then for the Brian Johnson song, I'm going to go with, and I know a lot of people say this is really kind of one of their most underrated albums, and I would agree. I think this is a fantastic album. It's the title track off "Flick of the Switch." I love the riff on that song, and it's just a kick-ass rocker. I mean, I love, you've got coming off the heels of Back in Black and For Those About to Rock. Um, for whatever reason, it just never kind of caught on with people or resonated with people like those two albums did. But I love Flick, tripping over my tongue saying it for whatever reason. Flick of the Switch. Is my favorite song on that album. And I love it. I'm a big Bon Scott guy. So probably most of these, I'm going to pick the Bon Scott version. And I do love Flick of the Switch, but I still got to go with Highway to Hell as the better of the two.
Right, yeah.
And I didn't mean to have my number five be the title track from each album. It just kind of worked out that way. But
yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious now. I mean, after hearing your guys' picks, knowing what I know my picks are going to be, how many overlaps we'll have. And another thing I wanted to say, when it comes to Bon Scott and Brian Johnson, because like you just said, you're a Bon Scott guy, you're a big Bon Scott guy. With me, I really like these guys equally. I mean, because it's always been that, well, are you in the Bon Scott camp or the Brian Johnson's camp? Hey man, I'm in both of them. I really do. I love both those eras, and I think each of them has kind of their own charm to it. I mean, with Bon Scott, you got more of a sense of humor than you do with Brian Johnson, but Brian Johnson also is on more of the heavy as hell songs that AC/DC had. So they both. I'm gonna every time I do this, I'm gonna go ahead and give Aaron Mutha send his picks. So his number five.
I'm muting you, Gary. I'm muting you.
His number five for Bon Scott is Kicked in the Teeth. And his number five for Brian Johnson is The Razor's Edge. So there you go. I won't talk about them. I'll just mention them. I've got some in here that are, bigger songs too. And probably the whole overplayed part, factors into some of these picks. Because, if you would have asked me years and years ago, I mean, probably most of my picks would have been off of Back in Black and Highway to Hell or something. But
well, and to your point, Gary, because I think it's a great one, just the fact that, with Bon Scott, when that era ended, if you even want to call it an era, I think there was that seamless transition into Back in Black. They didn't lose a step. Whereas with Van Halen, I think Sammy Hagar was writing different lyrics than what David Lee Roth would have written. Whereas Brian Johnson, I could totally hear Bon Scott singing any of those lyrics that Brian Johnson wrote. Whereas there's a lot of Sammy Hagar, Van Halen lyrics I could never in a million years imagine David Lee Roth singing. So, yeah, I think with AC/DC, it's easier to be like, I love both eras. I don't need to pick a side necessarily.
It's not as divided.
No,
Exactly.
not at all.
Yeah.
Well, even the sound, the Van Halen sound changed quite. There were more keyboards when Sammy was in there, and even Eddie's tone was so totally different on the guitar. So I mean, I think it's a lot more drastic change.
And yet, both of those bands are two of the only bands that survived a lead singer change, because most bands don't.
Yeah, bands that big. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah, to bring somebody in brand new and just have them take over the reins and have people still consider them a great band. I mean, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, totally. Okay, number 4 here. So my number 4 for Bon Scott is probably a lot of people would say they don't ever want to hear it again, but I picked Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll off of High Voltage. That's just one of the songs. I haven't got sick of it. I love it. I love the that's one of those ones, kind of a story song, right? They're talking about being on the road and all the struggles that are with it, and you can just totally picture Bon Scott just, okay, this is all the shit we've been dealing with, and I'm just writing it out. Here it is, and it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll, buddy. I just think that's a fantastic song, and it's got bagpipes in it. I mean, that's how many rock songs do you hear with that in it?
Well, I remember the thing I remember about that song is when the Red Wings won their first Stanley Cup of the 90s in 1997. I was a wedding DJ back then, and I was driving home. I wasn't able to watch the game because I had to work a wedding that night. And driving home, and the radio station played that like as a celebratory anthem for the Red Wings season, just all the struggles, because it had not been a overnight kind of thing. I mean, they had lost out in the playoffs a number of years, a number of heartbreaking losses, a number of losses to teams they should have beat. And so that song just kind of encapsulated their run to finally win the Stanley Cup. So I have a real affection for that song, and it's going to be, spoiler alert, it might be on my top 5 as well, but I just had to get that in there.
Yeah. Number 4, Brian Johnson, I went off with Fly on the Wall with Shake Your Foundations. That's just, I love that part where when he goes into the chorus and he goes, the way he goes, whoa, whoa, and then shake your foundations, and it's just, and the drums. I mean, I'm not crazy about the production of that album in a way, because they kind of bury Brian Johnson's vocals in a lot of those songs, which is, I don't know. I don't know if, because I know, they produced it themselves. I don't know if Malcolm and Angus were kind of pissed at him at the time, and so they're going to bury some of his vocals or whatever it was. But they, I can't even make out half of what he says, but all I know is it sounds cool. I know he's screaming throughout the songs, and the chorus is an earworm, man. And the drums sound like sledgehammers, and I love it. I love that song, man. That album. Side 1 on that album's got some pretty good songs, really. Side 2, it starts to get a little bit weaker, but it's definitely got some strong cuts on that one. So those are my picks for the 2 guys. And picking that, I mean, I'd probably have to go with Long Way to the Top for my pick out of those 2. So,
just for the bagpipes alone. I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. That's the one.
Yeah, Fly on the Wall is a funny production because it is noisy, and Brian is mixed pretty far back, and I don't necessarily know if they had a problem with him. It's almost like they're producing it themselves, and they know his vocals are there. They know to hear them, so that's why sometimes you need an outside producer to go, guys, I can't hear Brian. You can't.
Yeah.
Somebody outside putting that tape in their tape deck, they're not going to hear the vocals. They're way the hell in the background. They're like, and
in the bass.
You can't make out his lyrics. I have no idea what most of those lyrics said, but that's a great song.
Thank you.
Okay, so my next pick, I guess number four, Bon Scott era, be from an album we've already talked about, "Shot Down in Flames."
Oh yeah.
Um, Great song. Bon. Here's the thing with Bon Scott, and when Mutt Lange started working with them, so you get the one album with Mutt Lange and Bon. I think that Bon Scott was only getting better as a vocalist. Like he was actually starting to really sing, still a rock singer, but you know what I mean? Like of the two guys, Bon and Brian, Bon was probably the better singer. But I really think he hit a peak on Highway to Hell, and it's you never know what might have happened after that. But yeah, "Shot Down in Flames" always been a favorite of mine. I like the part in the guitar solo where right before the guitar solo, where Angus keeps doing the pick slides, and Bon Scott's like, "That's nice." Like that's just so much personality, right?
Yeah, he was a showman.
Yeah, he was quite a master storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Twinkle in
sure.
his eye, and So for my Brian Johnson, I am going to go to the Razor's Edge, and I'm going to go for the second track, "Fire Your Guns." This one's short,
Yes.
sweet, to the point, and I've always been a fan of that one. Of the two of them, I'm going to go "Shot Down in Flames," though.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
All right, my Bon Scott pick, my number four, is going to be again with the title track for me, but it's "Let There Be Rock." And I'm just showing cassettes because number one, I just didn't feel like pulling the records out. And these are the formats that I first owned these on before I started collecting vinyl again and CDs and whatnot. But again, a great storyteller song. And it's just that theatrical vocal and his delivery. He's talking about "Let there be sound," and there was sound. "Let there be drums," and there were drums. So, he's just like kind of going through it all. And it's so fun to listen to him because he has that theatrical. He's a showman. His cadence is perfect. He's so much, it's so much fun to listen to his vocals because he's just so eccentric. He's got one of the most recognizable voices in all of rock and roll, and he pulls it off and he has fun with it. And this song, it's like basically like a history of rock and roll. He starts about talking back in 1955, the white man had the schmaltz, kind of like a knock on, kind of like the white men ripping off the black music. The black man had the blues. But just a great song. I love that one. And then my number four Brian Johnson pick is gonna be "Inject the Venom."
Mm.
Yeah, I love that song. I'm a big fan of that album. I won't say it's my favorite. Um, but I really do like that one a lot. And yeah, I don't know. There's some killer riffs on there. Again, you got the Mutt Lange production, so it's like a sister album to Back in Black, just not as popular, not as overplayed as it were. But it's just a really killer hard rock song from Brian Johnson, who obviously slays it on vocal, but I don't know. I think it could have been a single, actually, if they had gone that deep, if the album had done well enough that they started releasing more singles off the album. But of the two, yeah, I got to go with "Let There Be Rock" just because it tells a story and it's a lot of fun to listen to. I really like that album too. "Let There Be Rock" might be my favorite Bon Scott AC/DC album.
All right. For Aaron's number four, for Bon Scott, he's got "Love Song."
Wow,
That's a deep one.
deep cut from the original High Voltage.
Yeah, that was only on the box. Was that just on the box set? Is that the only way you could get that? Like
It's
on
on the original Australian High Voltage album, and it's on backtracks.
Which is
It's their
why I'm
only
not familiar with.
ballad. It's a very, very strange song.
And then for Brian Johnson, he's going back to the album you were just on, Jeff, with Night of the Long Knives. I do love that chorus on that. So that he's singing that kind of different. It's not, Tim, you were talking about Bon Scott and being a better singer and everything. I think Brian Johnson's a bit of a better. I'm not disputing what you said, but I think he's a bit of a better singer than sometimes he gets credit for. I mean, like, if you listen to some of those songs, like say on Black Ice, he's kind of singing them different. I mean, he can sing with a little bit of soul into him at times. It's just, I think he sings kind of for the song, like where they were. But I think he can probably do a little bit more than we give him credit for. But
I think somebody like Tom Kiefer.
Yeah. But if you listen to the stuff that he did and I'm not overly familiar, but the stuff he did in Geordie, he sang differently in that band. He didn't sing as high. So, or if you watch the Hoover vacuum cleaner commercial that he did in 1980, just before Back in Black came out, I'm not making this up. You go on YouTube, type in Brian Johnson vacuum cleaner commercial. I am not kidding. But anyhow,
I believe you.
And he awesome. Does not suck.
Yeah.
Okay, number 3, Bon Scott, going off of, I don't know if this is my favorite of the Bon Scott albums off of Power Age, but Sin City. I love that. I love the opening of that song. I like that section, kind of like toward the end where it's just the bass going and he's saying the lines there. The whole song is just kind of a badass sounding song, and going back down to Sin City, and it's just, I love it. I love that song. I mean, that was one of those songs that I'm like, I can't believe this wasn't like a bigger hit. Mm-hmm. To me, that just sounds like a hit, but it never really was much of a hit. And then, strangely enough, number 3 on the Brian Johnson is another one that I consider kind of a sinister sounding song, is Evil Walks, off of For Those About to Rock. That's always been one of my favorite songs off that album. And I love the part. It starts out, with the crashing and everything, and then it kind of gets into that little bit of groove going there, black shadow hanging over my shoulder and all that kind of stuff. He just mentions all these things, but when he gets to the part when they're doing the chorus towards the end, and they, evil walks, and it's just beside you, evil walks behind you, and it's like, I can listen to that thing, I don't know how many freaking times I've heard it, and that thing can still give me goosebumps in that part of that song, man. I mean, if I got it cranked up like that, I just, AC/DC is so good at doing simple things and creating atmosphere that way, just the way they, how many songs do they have where it starts out with, just a guitar playing, and then here comes the bass, and here comes the drums, just the dynamics that they create. And, that song there is dynamics just for that boom, boom, that they add. It's just like, yes, these guys are awesome. And so those are my 2 picks.
Well, and if you're never going to do any slow songs as a band, you got to mix it up in other different ways. So every song doesn't sound the same.
Yeah. Exactly. And they were masters at that. Although I don't know, some of it, I always feel like every album they do always has, I shouldn't say every album, but almost every album they do always has like 1 or 2 throwaway songs. It's kind of like, all right, let's do another, especially like, when they were in the Bon Scott era, let's do another, kind of a Chuck Berry bastardized version or something. Mm-hmm. I suppose to pick out of those 2, maybe I'd go with Evil Walks, but that's kind of tough. I'd almost say it's a draw, but for the hell of it, I'll say Eagle Walks.
Cool. So for my next one, for my number 3, I'm gonna say the same one that Gary said, Sin City from Power Age. I mean,
Awesome.
it is a killer song. It's one of their heaviest songs, especially the Bond era. Like, it's just relentless. Great lyrics. Yeah, and it is a shame. It's probably Sin City's probably the best known song from Power Age, but Power Age is like that dark horse album that you just don't hear about. And I think that the equivalent album in the Brian Johnson era is one that's already been talked about, is Flick of the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm going with the title song. I think it's great. Song for song, I actually think it's a better album than For Those About to Rock, song for song. There's great songs on For Those About to Rock, but I think this one's better all the way through. It's more consistent. But these two albums are sort of like hand in hand as albums that, you can pick almost any song off of either of these, and they aren't the ones that radio played to death. So between Sin City and Flick of the Switch, they're both really great. I give Flick of the Switch props whenever I can, but I got to go with Sin City. It's just so good.
Yeah, we're going to have some repeats.
Yeah. Speaking of which, my next one is also going to be a repeat, and that was the one that Gary talked about off this album. The first track, it's A Long Way to the Top. If you want to rock and roll, I mean, it's the bagpipes. The bagpipes sell it. What other rock song has bagpipes, freaking bagpipes on the song? And I love it. But it's, it's not a complicated guitar riff, but it does the job. And very cool. You said it best, Gary. And then my number 3 pick for the Brian Johnson era, I know is going to be an unpopular album to show. Going to be some eye rolling, but it's going to be Out Back in Black. And I'm picking Have a Drink on Me.
Oh, yeah.
That's a fantastic guitar riff, bluesy guitar riff. It's great. It's a great barroom, barn burner kind of a song, just a filthy riff. I love it. Brian Johnson kills it. And they came up, always wondered if Bon Scott had lived, what the album would have sounded like. But they wrote such incredible material for to introduce Brian Johnson to the world as the new AC/DC singer. If they had come up with a bunch of shit songs, I don't think people would have really accepted Brian Johnson, but there's just no denying all those great songs on there. I mean, Hell's Bells, Back in Black, You Shook Me All Night Long, Have a Drink on Me, Shake a Leg. Just so many great songs on that one. So I'm not shying away from Back in Black because it's kind of like, if you do a Pink Floyd list, you better not pick anything off the wall.
Yeah.
But
no,
anyway.
There's no denying Back in Black is a 5-star record. I mean, it's just fantastic.
It probably sold 1,000 more copies since we started this episode. Like, it will never stop selling.
Sure.
It's everything.
Yeah. Well, right now there's some 13-year-old kid that's listening to it for the first time.
First time. That's right. It's like a rite of passage. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Well, I'm going to pick the Have a Drink on Me. That's going to be my Brian Johnson pick of the two. So,
well, that's a good pick. And Aaron's picks were Dirty Deeds, Done Dirt Cheap, and Who Made Who. So he went for a couple hits.
Good ones.
On that time. Yeah. Let's see. So we are at number 2 already. Well, yeah, my number 2 for Bon Scott is, well, it's definitely not a hidden gem or a here.
Oh.
This is all I got to do, and you know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That, I mean, as soon as you hear that, and you hear I want to tell you a story about a woman I know. When it comes to loving, she steals the show. I love that. The fact that, it's about a 266-pound woman. Don't they say 19 stone or something like that in the song? But I just love that whole, stop and start that it has. They're just once again, a very simple riff. And it just, it starts out like that, and then once it gets going, it's just, all right, man, here we go. Boom, now we're on a ride. And by the time the song ends, they're just, wailing on that song, man. They're just rocking. He's got a crazy solo going. And that song, is even better live. Hearing that thing, it's fantastic. I mean, every now and then you might run into a good bar band that can do a good version of that. And it'll just kick ass. And, bar bands tend to play more the Bon Scott because it's easier to play that era and sing. It's easier to sing. It's kind of hard to sing up there like where Brian Johnson does all the time. So the only thing they do off of that is usually You Shook Me All Night Long or something. But anyway, whole lot of Rosie. Fantastic song. That's off of the Let There Be Rock. And number 2, has been mentioned by all of us now, and that's a title track, Flick of the Switch. And Tim, I agree totally with your whole Flick of the Switch, Power Age, their analogy or comparison or whatever. And I think that's kind of like what a lot of AC/DC fans think too. Flick of the Switch, to me, that's a great, great album. And there's not really a bad song on it, in my mind. There's some songs better than others, but it's one of the ones from the, Brian Johnson era after Back in Black that I can listen to that thing from start to finish. Not all those albums I can do that. There's usually like a song or two that I just skip past or whatever, but that one I think is great. It's the first album they did, without Mutt Lange after doing 3 of them in a row. Now that one, I like the production on Flick of the Switch. For whatever reason, even though they produced it themselves, it sounds better than Fly on the Wall. It's got a very raw sound that, kind of goes back to their earlier days on there, but it's just heavy. And, songs like Flick of the Switch, Rising Power, House is on Fire, all that kind of stuff. But Flick of the Switch, I mean, the riff on that, the vocal, you guys already said it. Man, that is just a top flight AC/DC song.
Yeah, just when you think honestly, they've run out of riffs, it's like he comes up with that riff.
They come up with some other combination of notes that they've just never gotten to yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. With the flick of the switch, you blow it sky high. That's a tough one. You know what? I'm going to go with Flick of the Switch, even though it's going against.
Can you play the riff?
Rosie, huh?
Can you play that riff
on that? No, I can't. I could sit here for 20 minutes and try to figure it out. I mean, I kind of have an idea.
If I'd have known, I'd had everything plugged in. I can kind of play it. Hang on a second. I don't know if you guys can hear this or not. I got a little ukulele bass.
All right.
This probably won't come out over the. But do you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, we hear part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we heard part of it. By the time you got to the D there, it was lost.
Here, I'll play with the sound hole right up next to the phone.
Okay. I can't hear it at all.
Yeah,
okay,
I don't know why it's not. I don't know why the sound's not coming through. It's got to have the amplification, I guess. But damn it, I'd love to have you two guys trade off guitar licks for your favorite songs. That would be awesome.
Maybe next.
I should have thought of that ahead of time better, and I could have.
Well, here's the thing about AC/DC.
Yeah,
some say they're easy. They're hard to play right.
Yeah, well, a lot of it's timing.
Yeah, a lot of it's timing. A lot of it's knowing when not to play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or that, and once again, that goes back to the whole dynamics thing, you
Yeah,
know,
and
and
having
that's
the wrong guitar tone will do it too. You don't want a real metal tone. You don't want that. You want everything to be like
yeah,
nice
well,
and
see, yeah, that's the
medium.
thing. All I
Yeah.
have is a, you know, shitty Epiphone and some little tiny Washburn amp.
That's
So,
I got a that's what I got. I got an F phone, but it's an SG, so at least it looks,
well, you got looks, yeah, mine's a Les Paul body. So,
cool.
anyhow,
Uh,
who's you,
so
right?
it's my number two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go with an album that's been talked about, but nobody's talked about this song for Bon Scott, "Bad Boy Boogie," all over town. Love that. You know, only AC/DC could get away with having a song where all Angus does is like just hit an A note, where the rest of the band goes down, 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 and he's like only AC/DC could get away with that and have it work. Um, and for Bon Scott, I'm going to go with one of the biggest albums of all time, Back in Black, and a song that I've always loved, "Shoot to Thrill."
Mhm.
And of the two of them, I'm going to have to go with "Shoot to Thrill," but they're both
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
All right.
You with us,
Yeah,
Jeff?
well, Back in Black, it's one of those albums where, the songs that didn't make the radio are just as good as the ones that did. I mean, it's really like take your pick out of any of those songs. None of them are songs you couldn't imagine hearing on the radio. So any of
I
those.
think I've heard just about every song off Back in Black on the radio at one time or another, with the possible exception of "Shake a Leg," which is a great song too. But I think I've heard almost every other song on the radio at one time or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, my number two for the Bon Scott era, and here I am again with the title song, but I'm going to pick "Dirty Deeds," Done Dirt Cheap. Love that one. Again, more theatrical, animated vocals from Bon Scott talking about, how to get rid of somebody. I just love all the different ways to murder your lover, kind of, that whole thing. Yeah, it's really it's just a fun song. I mean, the topic notwithstanding, um I love it. And it's funny because um this album and Back in Black were the first albums that I heard like in their entirety, and I don't know why it took so long for them to release this album in North America, or at least in the States. But it really, I mean, I remember even in 1980, it sounded contemporary. I mean, I know it was only, probably 4 or 5 years that the actual album had been recorded, or however many years it was. But yeah, it was just kind of, one of those confusing things like, well, how, because they released it after Back in Black, and you're like, but it was before the internet. So you're like, what is this? And how did
Yeah.
this come to be? And who's this guy singing? It was just really a kind of a weird thing. And then you've got this cover, which is odd. It looks like a Supertramp
Weird. Doesn't have
cover
the
or
logo.
something. Yeah. They don't even have the logo on here, which might be the first
Yeah,
album that didn't, after High Voltage, maybe. Um, in the US. So yeah, it was just a very odd release, but I love that title track. Um, and then my Brian Johnson pick is going to be "Hell or High Water." I love the song there. Great Brian Johnson vocal. Fantastic. It's got that, heavy, and then it stops, and then heavy, and I just a really, and I don't know why this album people shit on it so much, because I actually do like it. I mean, could the production be better? Yeah, but I think the songs are still solid on it. And "Hell or High Water," it's one of my favorite Brian Johnson vocals. He just shreds it on that song. And if I had to pick between the two, I gotta go "Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap." I love that song.
Oh yeah, that thing comes on the radio. I still always sing along with it. And, especially if the wife is in the car, because, she knows the AC/DC hits and stuff. And I also, that's one of those ones where I love those AC/DC songs where you hear Malcolm and Angus in the chorus like that, dirty kids and the damn dirt cheap. And then Bon Scott goes, oh.
Yeah, it's a fun song. I mean, that's the thing about AC/DC is they can be heavy, but they also had a great sense of humor, a dark sense of humor to be sure, but especially in the Bon Scott era. I mean, like Big Balls even. I love Big Balls just for all the fun double entendres that they use. Yeah.
But even Dirty Deeds, how it ends and Bon goes,
yeah.
Yeah.
Which Brian Johnson could do that way better than Bon Scott, but still to hear, Bon Scott kind of let loose like that. Always a good time.
Yeah, you talk about sense of humor. I mean, even later, like I got a friend, one of his favorite AC/DC songs is Mistress for Christmas. Which, that would never be my top songs, but it is kind of a jokey song. Let's see. Aaron's number 2 was Touch Too Much and Evil Walks. So
Touch Too Much is great.
Yeah.
Touch Too Much is where you first hear the Mutt Lange background vocals that would become so much a part of the Def Leppard sound.
Yeah.
It was like, touch too much.
Yeah, for sure.
There for the very first time.
And then he went on to ruin Def Leppard.
Well, that was a sound that defined much of hard rock in the 80s. That Highway to Hell album is so groundbreaking. I mean, a lot of it, is down to the Mutt Lange's production, but that was really
and
the
on those albums. I mean, I have my own opinions about a lot of that stuff. I mean, I'm a huge Def Leppard fan, but on Highway to Hell and Back in Black, that production is perfect. There's not one thing out of place. Like the drums sound exactly like you want a drum set to sound, and everything's mixed really well, and everything's clear. And yeah.
I mean, it's been played to death now, but when you
there's a reason for it. There's a reason so many people.
Yeah, when you think of the song "You Shook Me All Night Long."
Yeah.
When you were first hearing that song, and when they got over the opening guitar and then the drums come in.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody wants to dance to it, right? That's why they still play it at every wedding and everything. Yeah. I mean, those drums, like you said, they sound like how you want drums to sound. Yeah. They didn't have a fake sound to them. They just sounded like real drums that were big. They weren't overly gigantic.
Just well mic'd. Just really, really well recorded.
Yeah.
My biggest problem with Mutt Lange, production aside, how could you cheat on Shania Twain? I mean, come on.
What an idiot! I tell you.
Anyway,
I'm going to get my guitar ready, so Gary can go ahead. I'm going to get my guitar ready for my last 2.
All right, awesome, great, good.
So he's going to miss my number 1 pick.
Oh no, I'm right here.
He can still hear you, Gary.
Still hear you. Small room.
Okay, my number 1 on the Bon Scott is off of High Voltage. It is Livewire. To me, that's one of those perfect examples of early AC/DC and the whole thing we've been talking about, the dynamics, a song building, just having that bass, coming in the guitar, bow, 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 da, 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 and just the way he sings that. That's another one. He kind of starts it out slower, lower, and then he ends up screaming a little bit more until they get to the chorus. I'm a live wire. It's just, I'm as cool as a body on ice. What a lyric. I always think that was cool. And then, of course, I got that part, where towards the end, the guitar is going, and then it's just a guitar. Get a little feedback. Right back into it. Just fantastic. I love that song. And then my next one, on the Brian Johnson era, and we're going to Back in Black on this. Totally big song. I've heard a million times. I just never get sick of it. And that is Shoot to Thrill. Shoot to Thrill is just, it's a perfect hard rock song. The lyrics are great. I mean, the whole line, shoot to thrill, play to kill, too many women with too many pills. I mean, that just, you're singing that and you're thinking, yeah, here you are, this old man, but you're going, yeah, too many women with too many pills. Yeah. It's just a fantastic, badass song. Always sing along with it every time. So those are my two picks. And out of that, I don't know. You know what? I probably got to go with Shoot to Thrill. I just think that's a perfect rock song. So those are my number one picks. You know what? Let me do Aaron's real quick, or I'll forget because we won't be coming back around. So his number one for Bon Scott is Soul Stripper. And number one for Brian Johnson is Back in Black.
Wow.
Well, there you go.
That's an unpopular pick, but very brave.
I'm surprised he did that, but he's that way sometimes. He gets a popular song. He says he doesn't care. He doesn't get tired of it. So, all right.
Well, and I think, the great thing about AC/DC, and Tim brought this up, is it's like when not to play. Like there's guitar, but then there's spaces where there's not guitar. And it's like they pick their moments and it all works together, where there's guitar, but then there's not guitar. There's just bass and drum. And then there's guitar. That's what makes a song so catchy, is the way the songs are structured. It's not just like heavy guitar all the way through, knock you over the head. It's like there's spaces where there's not guitar. And then when the guitar comes in, it's like for dramatic effect, it just heightens the tension, or, it just really drives the song and gives it that personality and that dramatic flair. But yeah, Tim, you look like you're all amped. I feel like this is like NPR, a Tiny Desk concert that we're having right now.
I'm just wondering if I'm just going to hit one note. You tell me if you guys can hear me.
No, do it again.
No, why can't we hear him?
No, how do we not hear that?
The microphone must cut it off.
Yeah, like I could hear Gary, but I can't hear for whatever reason. Do you have that amplified?
Yeah. Hang on a second. I'm determined here, because this is important.
I know. I'm like,
I'm gonna unplug the phone
anticipating.
Here. Okay, hang on a second, guys. I'm gonna set this almost right on top of my amp. Now,
one more time.
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay. I'm also major out of tune. Just hang on, bear with me, guys. I'm not one of those guys that can go on stage with music playing and tune my guitar, which is why I don't go on stage. Okay. Now hold on. Now let's. Do you hear that really good?
Yeah, I heard it.
Okay,
I heard it.
So, my Bon Scott song, number one of my favorite AC/DC songs ever.
I'm losing it again.
We lost it. Like, what the heck? Why is that happening? I can hear, like, when you were just like kind of doing this or that, I could hear it. But then when you actually went into the song,
it must just cut off. There must be like a noise limiter or something.
Oh, that might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, because anyways, like when you unplugged it, I could hear you unplug it.
That's really weird. Anyway, the song's Jailbreak.
Man,
Song is Jailbreak, which if you were on Australia, you'd say that's from Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. But I remember seeing the video back in the 80s, and it was the first time I'd ever seen Bon Scott. I always got a kick out of that video, and I got into the song too. Like, you're rooting for the guy to get out. Oh, he made it out. In his back, Yeah, no, I love it. It's one of my favorites. And to bring it ahead, an album that has been mentioned from Ballbreaker, I'm going to go with Hail Caesar.
Wow.
I love that song too. That's another, that's a silly video actually, but I do really like the song. So, and of the two though, I got to go with Jailbreak ultimately.
Yeah. That video is one where Angus looks like he's a little kid, looks like he's like 14 years old or something.
Yeah.
Well, he dresses like he's 14 years old.
Yeah. Well, that one, he really looked like it.
Yeah. All right, my number one, and this might be my number one AC/DC song of all time. I love this one. It's off Powerage Riff Raff. One of the heaviest things that Bon Scott ever recorded. It sounds very thrashy. Like at the beginning, it sounds like a thrash song, and then it kind of settles down a bit. You've got that bass groove, but it's just an incredibly heavy song. One of the heaviest songs during the Bon Scott era. I think they might have opened their concerts with it back in the day, but it's an incredible hard rocker. I love it. Bon Scott just shreds the vocal. It's an amazing guitar showcase. Love that song. And then my Bon Scott is going to be again with the title track for those about to rock. We Salute You. I love that guitar opening. It reminds me a little bit of Gimme Shelter from the Rolling Stones, the way that opens up.
Yeah.
Kind of with that guitar. I think that's what I've always loved about it. I've always loved that opening. And then at the end with the cannon fire, the video is great. The video, it feels like it's taken right out of the gatefold from that album. But yeah, I just love it. I like For Those About to Rock more than I like Back in Black. I mean, there's probably, I could name a handful of songs I like more than Back in Black, or a handful of albums, I mean. But yeah, those are my two. And if I had to pick two, I mean, Riff Raff all day long would be my favorite.
Have either of you seen AC/DC in concert?
I saw them on the Black Ice tour in 2009.
Yeah, I saw the Stiff Upper Lip and the Black Ice tour. Yeah. And anytime I think of For Those About to Rock, I mean, you picture them playing it live because that's how they end.
Yeah.
And those cannons, I mean, Jesus, that is so loud and that is so dramatic, when he goes, fire, and they start going, boom, and then they boom, and they're just ending it. Those cannons are shooting off, and you're just like, this is so much fun. I mean, it's just, I wish I could have saw them earlier on. I don't know why I didn't. I really don't. Why I didn't see them back whenever, but it's just, it took me a long time to see them, and I don't know. Sounds like they might end up doing some more touring. I thought they were dead and gone, but apparently.
Well, I like that last album, Power Up.
I do too. Matter of fact, I almost picked the song "Kick You When You're Down."
Yeah, no, it's got some good songs on it. I didn't care for Rock or Bust that much, honestly.
No, but I love the song "Rock or Bust."
Yeah, Play Ball was all right, the first single. But
those two songs, the album
nice
itself,
surprise.
Those songs I loved.
Yeah,
and I think all those later ones, they all still have a few classics in there here or there. Like the song on Stiff Upper Lip. I love the title track. I think that's a fantastic song, and I love the song "Damned."
Yeah, I like "Safe in New York City."
What was yes, yes.
Safe in New York City is a good one. Yeah. Black Ice. Black Ice has 15 songs on it. It's too long an album for AC/DC. They should have trimmed it down.
Totally agree. That's
Good
that hurt
solid
that
10
album.
track
That's why
album.
it's like it's hard for me to listen to it without jumping songs because it's too long. It's like you should not have more than 10 songs if you're AC/DC, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that hurt
They-
that album because it's got some good songs on
They could have saved it and done, written some more songs and had another album out somewhere in there because the gaps between the albums just got to be more and more.
there. Yeah.
Well, that was a fun list to do.
Yeah,
I'd have to
it's
keep
hard.
track of like which was more popular of our picks, the Bon Scott or the Brian Johnson era. I don't think it matters. I mean, it's all AC/DC when it comes down to it.
Let me ask you guys something before we click off here. Did you have a harder time picking the 5 Bon Scott or the 5 Brian Johnson?
For me, probably the Brian Johnson. Just because I don't know. I think I probably the albums I listened to more are from the Bon Scott albums. And honestly, for me, after like the Who Made Who album, Blow Up Your Video, when you start getting into like 90s and beyond, like probably after the Razor's Edge, it's just kind of like real hit or miss for me. And there's more albums to choose from. With Bon Scott, I mean, it's a little bit easier just because there aren't as many albums to draw songs from.
Yeah, I had a harder time with Brian Johnson because, like you said, there's more albums. Yeah, the albums got very inconsistent or very hit and miss, but like we were just saying, there was always a few great songs on there, and so there was like a bunch of songs. I'm like, man, I was just going back and forth as where I felt like with the Bon Scott, I narrowed it down pretty quickly to like, okay, these are some of my all-time favorite songs off of that. I mean, I probably could have easily thrown another one off of Highway to Hell on there, but I didn't. Yeah. What about you, Tim?
I didn't really have a hard time with either of them. I just started thinking about songs that I really liked and which singer they fell into. But I will say the Bon albums are probably, there's not as many of them, but they're probably more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, although I don't know. I still feel that there was always a few throwaway songs on those albums too.
Oh yeah, none of them were perfect. Yeah. Very few are perfect, but just think of the songs that they still do live. Like Let There Be Rock, they usually do about half of that album live. When I saw them, I think they did 4 songs from it, and that was 2009.
Oh yeah, they always do. Yeah, they have to do songs from.
Yeah.
That. Well, you know how that is. Like a lot of people, they're just into, the earlier parts of a band's career, and then later on, they get older and they're not buying records anymore, and things like that. So,
well, here's a question for you: what's your favorite Bon Scott album and your favorite Brian Johnson album?
I don't know.
For extra credit,
Power Age or Highway to Hell. That's tough.
If we consider High Voltage an album, I'm going to say High Voltage, like what we know as High Voltage.
Yeah, I would consider that.
That would be my favorite of the Bon albums.
Yeah. And then the Brian album, like I said, it all depends on when you would have asked me. You asked me years ago, I'd have said Back in Black, and at one time I might have said For Those About to Rock, but right now my pick would be Flick of the Switch.
Same. Yeah. Because I can't poke holes in Flick of the Switch. There's just nothing. It's just all really good. And it's that album took something like 18 years to go platinum. It was one of those ones that was stuck at gold for a long time, but it's so good. And production wise, I don't think it sounds all that different from the previous two. It's almost like they learned from working with Mutt Lange. I don't think it sounds all that different. And maybe the reason that Fly on the Wall sounds different is because it's different drummer. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
There were a lot of albums in '85 that had that wet drum sound. You know, it must have just been the studios, or I don't know what it was. The way they were miking the drums. I don't know.
And the shame of it is they never play anything off a flick of the switch.
There's, you know, you go to see AC/DC live and there's nothing between For Those About to Rock and Thunderstruck. Like it's like most of the '80s never happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And For Those About to Rock is the only song they do.
The only song. That's right. Yeah. So basically they basically just don't do anything between Back in Black and The Razor's Edge. And The Razor's Edge, they only do Thunderstruck. So
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I'd have to go with probably Let There Be Rock for the Bon Scott era. And then, you know, again, we talk about sometimes your favorite album by an artist is the one that you were introduced to first, or the first one that you bought. And for me, the first one that I actually bought, like when it came out, would have been For Those About to Rock. And so I've kind of got a soft spot for that. So, you know, Let's Get It Up was one of the first 45s I ever bought. So I just kind of a soft spot. Is it AC/DC's best album? Is it the best album of the Brian Johnson era? Probably not, but just from a nostalgic, sentimental place for me, that would probably be my pick. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, a fun one, guys. I appreciate it. AC/DC, a great band. Hopefully, we'll see the both of you next week when we move on to a different topic. But again, check out Tim's Vinyl Confessions and Physical Format Rock and Roll for more content, hard rock, AC/DC, otherwise. Also, got to put a plug in for Tim's Y&T book, Down for the Count, which Aaron Mutha-Alamere contributed to. So we got to move some more books for Tim. You can find it on Amazon. It's like $20 on Amazon, very reasonably priced. So make sure, if you're a hard rock fan, a Y&T fan, a Tim Durling fan, go there, pick it up. Great book. And you guys take care.
Thanks.